Welcome to Sunday School. You know, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Today we're talking about somebody's faith that made them the father of many nations. Somebody's faith that made them the ancestor of all that will believe. And somebody's faith that has been tested time and time again by God. Whose faith are we talking about? We're talking about the faith of Abraham. Today we're talking about someone's faith that caused them to be called the father of many nations. We're talking about somebody's faith that caused him to be the ancestor to all those that would believe. And somebody's faith that was tested time and time again by God himself. So we'll talk about Abraham. We're talking about the faith of Abraham. Now Abraham became the patriarch of the Jewish nation as he passed 10 severe tests of his belief in God and the covenant that God had for him. Now the most significant demand that God made on Abraham is that he and his descendants totally committed to a belief of one and only one God. Now this was the foundation of Judaism and Christianity. Now when Abraham settled in Canaan with his wife Sarah, he was 75 years old and he didn't have a child. But God promised that Abraham's seed would inherit the land and become a nation. Now he had a son Ishmael by his wife maidservant Hagar. And when Abraham was 100 years old, he and Sarah had a son, and they named him Isaac. Now, the main point that we want to bring out in this lesson is the difference between works and faith. Works and faith, because they're not the same. There are a lot of people that still believe that their works can justify them, or their works can bring them salvation. But no, that's not true. So we're going to be looking at the difference between works and faith. We're looking at Romans chapter 4 verses 1 through 12. Romans chapter 4 verses 1 through 12. And we're talking about the faith of Abraham. Now verse 1 says, "What shall we say then that Abraham our father, as pertaining to the flesh, had found?" Now Paul was describing Abraham as the father of the Jews in a fleshly or a physical sense. Now he could refer to Abraham as our father because Paul himself was a Jew. So he said Abraham our father, because he could make that spiritual and natural connection about Abraham. Okay, so when it's talking about what can we say about Abraham pertaining to the flesh? Now the flesh is, we could say the flesh is non-spiritual things. Non-spiritual things. So did he gain anything in the natural? We're talking about Abraham. Did he gain anything in the natural? Now we can't say that he didn't, because when he walked away from his family, he made a spiritual decision. That spiritual decision caused him to be blessed both spiritually and naturally. So we can't say that he didn't gain anything in the natural. And this letter to the Church of Rome was to affirm to the believers that salvation is a gift both to the Jews and to the Gentiles. It's not through works. The Bible tells us it's not through works, lest any man should boast, but it's rather a life that we choose to live in total and complete belief in God. So Abraham didn't gain anything according to the flesh, but his spiritual decision caused him to be blessed both ways. So what he gained it through a spiritual decision. That spiritual decision was to have faith and to follow God. And we look at verse 2. Verse 2 says, "For if Abraham was justified by works, he had thereof to glory, but not of God." Justified by works. Now, the works of Abraham didn't justify him. No, his work couldn't justify him. If his works could justify him, then he would be able to boast to his friend and to his family that I did this, I worked this out, I worked that out. Therefore, we are blessed because of what I did. So, but he couldn't do that. Abraham works couldn't justify him. Now, the word justify means to declare or made righteous in the sight of God. To declare or to be made righteous in the sight of God. Nobody has the power to declare themselves or to make themselves righteous in the sight of God but God. When we are declared and made righteous in the sight of God, then that's a gift from God. So nobody has that power to put themselves in the position to declare themselves to be righteous in the sight of God. So Abraham is a person of righteousness because of his obedient faith in God. So let's look at verse 3. Verse 3 says, "For what saith the scripture? Abraham believed God, and it was counted unto him for righteousness." Abraham believed God. Now, just as faith was in the Old Testament, the people was told about God and they believed God and they followed God. They didn't have the new covenant that we have today. Now, in the New Testament, we have a better covenant. Now, we follow the scripture that if we confess with our mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in our heart that God has raised him from the dead, then we shall be saved. So in the Old Testament, they believed on God. In the New Testament, we believed in God. We believed on Jesus. Both is an act of faith. Now, God tells Abraham that he will have countless descendants. Countless descendants. And when God told Abraham this, Abraham believed God. Now, to believe, it means to make something as true. To make something as true. So when God told Abraham that he was going to give him countless descendants, Abraham believed God. So God counted his belief as righteousness. He counted his belief as righteousness. Now, verse 4 says, "Now to him that worketh is the reward not reckoned of grace, but of debt. To him that worketh." We could use the example of an employee and an employer. Since we all have had jobs, we can understand this very clearly. Now, to the person that works on the job, go to work and work his 40 hours a week, he's looking to be paid. He's looking to be paid. Now, his pay won't come from the employer because the employer just loves him so much. But his pay will come because the worker, which is you put in your 40 hours, you have earned it. So his reward is not of grace, but it is a debt of the employee. He owes you. He owes you for those 40 hours. So if we look at verse 5, it says, "But to him that worketh not, but believe on him that justified the ungodly, his faith is counted for righteousness." Now, if you go to work and you work those same 40 hours that week, but when you through with those 40 hours that week, you get a bonus. You get a bonus. Without putting in any extra hours at all, you get a bonus. Now, this is a gift. This is a gift because you didn't put in any other work for it. You didn't have to put in an extra 8 hours to get that. So this is a gift. Now, this is grace because the giver gave it without receiving anything in return. And that's what God do. He gives without getting anything in return. So when we believe in God, he credits us with righteousness. So this is how we receive righteousness. Not that we earn it, but the price of it has already been paid. Now, this was important to the Gentiles. It was very important to the Gentiles because they wasn't always in the household of faith. Actually, their connection with Abraham go back a good way because the Gentiles were people of idols. And Abraham's family was people of idols. In fact, Abraham's father was a maker of idols. So this was important to the Gentiles that they didn't have to earn their way into the covenant. And they didn't have to worry about who can put them in and who can keep them out. They didn't have to worry about all these different laws and rituals that you had to go through. So they didn't have to worry about those things because the price of righteousness had already been paid for. So this was a good thing for the Gentiles. So let's look at verse 6, 7, and 8. Verse 6 says, even as David also described the blessedness of the man, unto whom God imputed righteousness without works. Imputed righteousness without works. Now, David also described the blessedness of a man. Now, he described this in Psalms 32, verses 1 and 2. Verse 1 said, blessed is he whose transgressions is forgiven, whose sin is covered. Now, the word transgression means to intentionally disobey or to willfully trespass a command. To intentionally disobey or to willfully trespass a commandment. So what the writer was saying, that blessed is he who intentionally disobeyed, but is forgiven, and his sins is covered. Now, verse 2 says, blessed is the man whom the Lord imputed not iniquity, and in whose spirit there is no guile. Now, the word iniquity means immoral or grossly unfair behavior. So the writer was saying, blessed is the man whom the Lord imputed not his grossly or his immoral behavior. So there's three things that we can actually gather from this writer. And those three things are that God credited righteousness without earning it. There was no way for the man that had iniquity or the one that was a transgression, there was no way for him to earn it. So God credited righteousness without earning it. Number two is that the person was a sinner who God forgives because they had transgressions. They had iniquity, but God forgave them. And number three is that God removes sin from the person's account. When our faith is applied, God applied righteousness, then he removed the iniquity or the transgression from our account. As an old commercial used to say, who can ask for anything more? He removes the iniquity from our account. And that's something to be mighty glad about. So verse 7 says, saying, blessed are they whose iniquities or immoral acts are forgiven, and whose sins are covered. And verse 8 says, blessed is the man to whom the Lord will not impute sin, who not will charge and will erase it completely from off his account. Erase it completely from off his account. Verse 9 says, now, it asks a question, cometh this blessedness then upon the circumcised only, or upon the uncircumcised also? For we say that faith has reckoned to Abraham for righteousness. So, do this blessing come to the circumcised only? We're talking about the blessing of being justified or made righteous. Let's look back a little bit at this phrase, circumcision or circumcised. Now, the commandment to circumcise was a covenant made with Abraham, and it can be found in Genesis chapter 17, verses 10 through 14. And it talks about it, or rather it says that God spoke to Abraham, and he said that this is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and thy seed after you. And it says that every male child among you shall be circumcised. Now, the circumcision act was an outward physical sign. It was an outward physical sign. Just like if you told me that you had a tattoo on your upper arm. And I said, no, you don't. And you said, I do. And you roll up your sleeve and you show it to me. You showed me the physical sign of your tattoo. So the circumcision was a outward physical sign of the eternal covenant between God and the Jewish people. And the Jewish people circumcision is routinely performed on the 8th day of the child's life. And it can be performed only in the daylight hours. Now, what Paul was doing, Paul was trying to make the point that the Gentiles didn't have to be circumcised. Now, he wasn't trying to get around the law because he was a Jewish believer himself, so he didn't want to put himself out there to say that he was trying to contradict the law. So he wasn't trying to get around the law, but he was using the law to show that this was not a requirement to be included in the covenant. Circumcision wasn't a requirement to be included in the covenant. So it goes back to the question. So does this blessing come to the circumcised only? Or those of circumcision? Do it come to them only? Or do it come to the uncircumcised also? And the answer is yes. It do come to the uncircumcised too, because the price of righteousness have already been paid. It's already been paid. Now, verse 10 says, since we asked the question in verse 9, it goes on and say, then how was it then reckoned? When he was in circumcision or in uncircumcision? Not in circumcision, but in uncircumcision. Now, Paul was talking mostly to a Gentile crowd, but he makes a Jewish argument to explain that since Abraham was not circumcised before righteousness was imputed to him or credited to him, then neither do the Gentiles have to be circumcised before righteousness is credited to them. So that seems fair. So it is the faith in the Lord that concerns God. See, it is faith that is credited to the believer's account as righteousness. The faith is more important than some certain doctrines and some certain laws that we might come up with, or that somebody might give to us, or that we might follow. The faith is more important than those things. Okay, verse 11. Verse 11 said, and he received the sign of circumcision, a seal of righteousness of the faith which he had yet being uncircumcised, that he might be the father of all them that believe, though they be not circumcised, that righteousness might be imputed unto them also. As a sign, an event, an activity, or a thing that has a deeper meaning. See, this had a deeper meaning to Abraham. Circumcision was more than just a ritual to Abraham. It represented his faith in God. So Paul describes the seal as a preserver of what's inside of Abraham. It is sealed to make sure that what was inside of Abraham, which was his faith, stayed secure. And just like us, we are sealed. We are sealed. What's inside of us, God wants it to remain in us. He wanted it to be kept in us. Now, verse 12 says, let me read that. Verse 12 said, and the father of circumcision to them who are not of the circumcision only, but who also walk in the steps of that faith of our father Abraham, which he had been yet uncircumcised. The father of circumcision. Now he became the role model of circumcision. See, there was no circumcision or nobody being circumcised before Abraham. He performed the first circumcision on himself with a hatchet at age 80. Yeah, with a hatchet at age 80. Now, God made him the ancestor to all that will have faith. To all that will have faith, he made him the ancestor to them. Now, righteousness was credited to him because of his faithfulness to God. And he was the first person to participate in the covenant. Now, we can relate to Abraham. We can relate to his walk in faith, because it's about placing our lives and having complete trust and faith in God. See, faith is what moves God. Now, it's the foundation for the law and God's covenant and relationship with his people. Now, our faith proves that we are already circumcised in the heart. We're already circumcised in the heart because we believe God. And when we believe in God, he credits us with righteousness, which puts us back in the line with, you know what, the faith of Abraham. Don't let your works lead you to thinking that they can justify you or put you into a place of righteousness. Remember, we said works can represent the flesh, and flesh represent non-spiritual things. And remember, God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. So, if works is fleshly and God is spirit, then we should know and understand that the two will not mix together. Just like he did Abraham. When we believe and trust and put our faith in God, then he adds righteousness to us. And he takes the sin, he takes the iniquity and the transgression, and he removes it from our account. And just like Abraham believed God, and we can believe God also. But our works will never justify us. It's a gift from God to be declared righteous in His sight. I'm Elder Robert Wilson, and this has been Sunday School.